Welcome back to another micro lecture, module 2, variable types, enumerations, and data types. I apologize, my brain was somewhere else. Either way, we're going to jump right into deep dives into variable types. What are variable types? What are data types? In the last micro lecture, we discussed very briefly what data types are, but let's go a little deeper into what that actually means. So variable types are often referred to as data types, and they're defined as containers for storing data values in random access memory or static memory. In C#, there are different types of variables defined with different keywords. So let's go into some of the key ones or some of the key data types that we actually use. We have integer, which is an integral data type. All these data types that we're going to discuss, with the exception of string, is what's called a primitive data type. Now, we've spoken very briefly about what primitive data types are. I don't want to go too deep right now because it's another micro lecture we're going to talk about in this course material. But what I will tell you is that with a primitive data type, it's the atomic particle of programming. Primitive data types give you that base, that root that allows you to build off, right? So with ints, doubles, chars, and bools, those are all primitive data types. C# treats lowercase string as a primitive data type. I will let you know it is not a primitive data type. As a matter of fact, primitive data types do not originate from anything else. That is the prime definition. That's the true definition of what a primitive data type is, regardless of what Microsoft wants to tell you. All right, which means nothing builds into an int. An int is an int is an int. There's nothing else underneath int. Now, the reason why Microsoft can get away with saying that string is a primitive data type is because Microsoft converted all of their primitive data types into objects. And this makes things a little difficult because once you have one of the criterion for being a primitive data type is that it inherits from no object. It inherits from no class. But when all of your classes inherit from the object class, you have no primitive data types. So theoretically speaking, you can make the argument that C# has no primitive data types, but we're not going to go there. We're going to start with the fundamentals. There are primitive data types, no matter what Microsoft did to their language, that allow us to use the language in a way that makes sense to us as humans. So with that being said, an integer or an int is an integral data type, all right? It stores integers and it only stores whole numbers that are both positive and or negative. A double is a floating point data type, and a double is specifically allows for the user to use decimals. And I will tell you right now, if you use a double, it will pull decimal points at the end, no matter if you want it or not, unless you format the string or format the double as a string and remove them. Now, you might be saying, why not just use an integer? Well, there's a couple of problems with this. So let's say you want a number that is more specific than a whole number. Well, then integer won't work. You actually need to use a double. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to do what's called random number generation, you can't use an integer because random number generation always originates of the outcome of an RNG or a math.random, my apologies, the outcome of a math.random event, okay, is a number between 0 and 1. That is the outcome of math.random or a random number generator event. Okay. With that being said, you can't use integer because integer can only be a whole number, which means that if you tried to run math.random and convert it to integer, you would only get 0 or 1, which is literally 0% or 100%. And that can be a very big problem. So with that being said, we have doubles. Now, we have multiple floating point types. All right. Not only do we have double, we have long, we have float, and yes, we have a data type called decimal. I know there's people out there that'll beat me up about that, but there is a data type called decimal, unfortunately. We don't use it all that much, but we do have it. And it was akin to the Microsoft SQL decimal data type that we used to use back in the day. Now everyone uses invarchar. The next primitive data type I want to discuss is character or char. Now, char is very important because it can only be one character. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at char gives us that base model of building strings. Remember when I said a string isn't a primitive data type? Well, it isn't. What a string actually is a collection of characters, or more specifically, an array of chars. We haven't spoken about an array yet, but just understand that an array is a collection, okay? What is a string? Well, I just said what it was. It's an array of characters. Now, what's important about strings? All right. Strings, literal strings or string literals are normally denoted using double quotes around the things you would like the string to contain, around the characters you would like the string to contain. However, if you would like to initialize, or I'm sorry, if you would like to create and declare a char variable with a value, I said initialize, I guess I should have stuck with that, then you would need to use single quotes. So if I want to initialize a char variable with that, the value that I'm giving to it needs to have a single quotes around it, as you see here with the A and the B. However, with a string, I can use double quotes. Now, Boolean, such an interesting word. What is Boolean? Well, Boolean literally means true or false, 0 or 1, on or off. Boolean is the lowest common denominator of all data types that we can use. And it is how every CPU processes data. It determines whether that data is true or false. It determines what the outcome is by saying, is this true or is that true? Is that false or is that false? Is this true or that false? Is this false or that true? It does that constantly, and it does it at a mind-boggling rate. It moves so quickly, making these delineations that it seems to us that our computers are thinking faster than we are. That's not necessarily true, because intuition in our minds allows us to think that way without thinking about it, which is quite scary, in fact. Now, with that being said, I think I want to give you this one slide as an aside, and then we're going to pop on into the next micro lecture. But either way, here it is. This right here, this comes from W3 Schools. I want to plug them for a second. This is great information, and I would encourage everybody to go to W3 Schools to get that knowledge that you would like at a high level, and then to get deeper into the weeds, don't be afraid to go to MSDN. All right, MSDN will give you the information that you need at the lowest, at the most deepest level. Now, understand, MSDN is going to get deep, just like we are in this class. Either way, as I say in all my videos, good luck. Have fun.